Hi, I'm Mike, and in this short video series, I'll be going behind the scenes of What's Missing, the latest show from Casefile Presents, which I co-produced. What's Missing is a brand new 10-part series that explores the wide-reaching, devastating impacts that occur when someone disappears without a trace. Hosted by a founder and CEO of Missing Persons Advocacy Network, or MPAN in short, the series features candid interviews with family members and loved ones of missing Australians. And that's going beyond the headlines to provide that deep insight into their searches and struggles. What's Missing is available now on your podcasting app, so search for it and subscribe. I'm Mike, producer of Casefile True Crime and Casefile Presents shows, and on this channel I release videos on audio, podcasting, and what's like to be a podcast producer. So if you enjoy the content, hit subscribe and notifications buttons. Now I finished the last video on booking my flights to Australia. The plane was going out from London Heathrow to Sydney with a short stopover in Singapore. Now that was at the beginning of March 2020. Coronavirus pandemic was already happening in Asia. However, the UK, Europe and Australia didn't really have any restrictions yet. I was traveling with my wife Paulina, who's also media designer for Casefile and Casefile Presents. We had our masks, but we weren't worried as such. I was worried about a flight though. I don't enjoy being on a plane, and the last flight that we had, which was from New York to London in January that year, had some heavy turbulences. I was hanging onto the seat, I was quite stressed. But this one went better than expected. I slept through most of it, and we've landed in Sydney on a nice morning. The Casefile host picked us up as we were staying at his lovely home. As I mentioned before, the studio was in the heart of Sydney, and that was around 90-minute drive from where we were staying, so we had to make that trip in the morning and back in the evening. Unfortunately, I wasn't in Australia when we were booking the studio, so I wasn't there to physically check it, so we had to go with what we saw on the internet. And then the Casefile host called up a few places, and ultimately we've decided on this one. And the studio looked really modern and sleek. There were big glass doors, ambient lighting, mini fridges. In the recording room, there were 6 microphones, that's Rode Procaster microphones, set up around the table for the chat. The tracking room was behind the huge glass door, and the tech staff set us up with monitoring headphones. It all looked really professional, and I was happy that the look of it will make the guests feel really comfortable. However, as I stepped into the studio, I did notice a few things. The studio was in an office building with other offices next to it. They were only separated by thin walls. There wasn't any acoustic treatment or isolation, so I sensed straight away that this could be a problem. Now, the first couple sessions were happening on a weekend. Building was quiet, so that was good. The studio also appeared to have AC running constantly. Now, this is okay for short sessions, but could be problematic for longer days. The tech staff was very helpful and professional. They made us and family members feel comfortable and relaxed. There was also a green room upstairs where we could meet the guests, debrief and plan the sessions. As I mentioned before, the first couple sessions were happening on a weekend. That was Saturday and Sunday, and we had one session each on that day. After that, we booked morning and afternoon for the recording. We planned to focus on family members, get them recorded with their narration, with their pickups, with their chats. And then have Loren to do her scripted parts on a later stage, as we didn't want to push it. We started recording the first guest, and Loren said she'll try to do her narration parts as well. We said no problem, but no pressure. She starts reading the script, and it was perfect. We looked at each other and we high-fived. We were recording everything. Straight away I could see that Loren was not only a natural and a professional, but a great speaker, so I couldn't be more happier. So the day would look as follows. We would greet the families, explain the process, and then Loren would also explain how she would run the sessions. We'd start with reading from the script to record the story parts, and during that myself and Casefile host would jot down the notes for re-records and pickups, especially for the family members as they were leaving after each session straight away. When this was all done, Loren the guest could relax and have intimate informal chat that was recorded for the episodes. It was raw, it was emotional, they were beautiful sessions. Awesome job from Loren, guests and tech staff. Everyone was amazing. However, there were a few issues that I noticed I knew I'll have to fix later in a post. First of all, the noise. As I said before, the weekend was nice and quiet because the building was empty. However, morning sessions during the week, the offices next door were busy. Because the recording room wasn't isolated, the sound carried over. We could hear people laughing, people chatting away, and the microphone was picking up the louder noise. Several times I had to check the recordings to see if I could fix it later on. But it was stressful, especially when you have family member talking about their missing loved one, and it's a sad, it's a sorrow story, and then you have a huge laughter from next door. But we couldn't do anything about it, just, keep it cool. Fortunately, evening sessions were better as the offices emptied and the building was quiet again. The other issue was mobile phones, electronics in the recording room. I talk about it myself, I talk about it in my recording course, and in the middle of things, I didn't think of that. In some instances, the microphones were picking up interference from electronics nearby, and there were mobile phones, there were lightnings, there were cameras, TV screens, even glass terrariums in the recording room. And I've only noticed interference during the editing process. Then I remembered where the noise was coming from. Watch out for things like that. Any electronics in the recording studio, in a recording room, should be switched off. And even for someone who's a little bit more experienced, like myself, I overlooked that. Another thing was that the guests didn't really have much experience with such formats, so we got a lot of off-axis talking to the microphone, coughing into the microphone, huge dynamic range during the chat, people moving on their chairs, rotating, noisy jackets, things like that. All of that would have to be fixed or managed later on in a post. And lastly, the coldness that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Some guests already had a bit of a cold with a bit of a cough, a bit of a sneeze, and it was also harsh on Loren and Casefile hosts when they were recording their narration parts. I would recommend having a room temperature for a relaxed recording environment, as coldness can constrain your vocal cords and it's kind of difficult to be relaxed when you're, shivering. We had to have a constant supply of hot drinks to fight that, but, we got there in the end. The important thing is that the content itself was gold. The studio was a podcast in a box kind of place, but I wanted raw, unfiltered, uncompressed files. All the sessions were nicely labeled with the day and part of the day, so I knew where to find the audio. And of course I was making notes as we were recording, especially when we were doing pickups, so I knew where to find particular clips. The studio provided the feeds from all 6 microphones, which was a little bit of overkill because at most there were 2 people in a recording room. So I had to sort that out later on as well. Essentially the sessions, because of that, were 3 times bigger. I bought a hard drive for the occasion, so we made several copies. We said our goodbyes and that was that. We were flying back home on a weekend, so we had one more day for a debrief and to see a bit of Australia. It was actually my wife's Paulina's birthday this week, as well as our 10th anniversary, so she did a lot of sightseeing on her own. She even snorkeled with baby sharks. I only saw inside of a recording studio, so on the last day, Casefile hosts took us around for a sightseeing tour and it was a great ending to an amazing week. We were flying home and the pandemic was coming with us. In the next video, I'll talk about editing What's Missing podcast, but in the meantime, subscribe to the show. That's it for today. I'm Mike from Mike Migas Production. If you liked the video, if you want to learn more about podcasting, check out the rest of my channel as well as my website mikemigas.com. But for now, share, like, subscribe, and I'll see you later.